Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. On this episode, I sat down with Dan Hodges. He is a retired FBI profiler, hostage negotiator, and counterintelligence officer. So cool. Oh my gosh, these are things that interest me very much. I went to his house and we sat down and chatted about all sorts of things. He did tell me that I have the serial killer earlobes. Apparently there's an earlobe marker that says whether or not you're going to be a serial killer. I don't know if I was proud to have that or horrified. Those of you who know me well know that I'm always interested in reading about serial killers. I think they're fascinating. That being said, he's now retired, as I mentioned, and he has a private investigation firm. So that makes sense to me. I mean, can you imagine having your life be all about all those things and then retiring and just, kicking around the house? It'd be maddening. So he has the private investigation firm, which I've posted a link to that on heyhumanpodcast.com. So if you are in need of such a thing, there it be. He's super chill dude. I mean, I guess you'd have to be a hostage negotiator. You have to be calm, really super calm. He is the epitome of a laid-back guy, as far as I could tell. Oh, that weird noise is my pipes. Not my pipes, but the pipes in my kitchen. I gotta get that fixed. Anyway, I don't know if you even heard that. You might not have. It sounds like kind of like a moose crying or a cow passing gas, kind of both together. It can be off-putting, nonetheless. Anyway, yeah, so Dan was very cool. It was super interesting, and in fact, for the kids playing at home, I do say interesting and fascinating in this episode probably 36 times. I'm so enthralled by all this kind of information. In other news, I am about to do I haven't figured it out yet. I don't know if I want to do advertising. I don't know if I want to do like a Patreon thing. There is a donut. There's a donut button on my page. Every time you hit the donut button, a donut will come to your door. Wouldn't that be amazing? Somebody needs to invent that. Somebody probably has invented that, the donut app. Anyway, there's a donate button on my heyhumanpodcast.com page. If you like what you hear, you're digging it, you want to hear it, keep going. It does the website and the hosting and all the stuff. It does cost money, obviously, out of my pocket, and happy to do it. But if anybody feels like chipping in and donating, that would be awesome. That's enough about that. Don't forget to go on iTunes and rate and review Hey Human Podcast. If you get a moment, it'd be fantastic. And as always, Instagram.com/HeyHumanPodcast, Facebook.com/HeyHumanPodcast, and email me, Susan at heyhumanpodcast.com. I would love to hear from you. That's my best William Shatner impersonation. Wow, I'm doing great with words today. Crazy words. Oh, words. So, that's about that. I've rambled on long enough. Thanks for listening. As always, hope you enjoy. Here we go. Hi, Dan Hodges. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thank you for being on Hey Human. You are someone that I wanted to talk to since I started this podcast because I find it fascinating. You are a retired FBI profiler.
Correct.
And currently a private investigator, correct? Yes, but it's the profiling that I'm so fascinated by. So that profiling in general began, in the 70s?
Yeah, I think it started getting popular then. Behavioral Science Unit at Quantico started doing some things in conjunction with the National Academy, which was a thing that Mr. Hoover incorporated years ago, where police officers come into Quantico for training. And they were always saying we need help on crime scenes and offender profiles and things like that. And a lot of it was developed in conjunction with the University
Sorry.
Did it mess up?
I just pulled the little wire out.
Oh, okay.
Hold on. One second.
That's your power cord.
Yeah, I think I probably have enough. You know what? I have enough. It should last.
Okay.
We'll be fine.
All right. University of Virginia. I'm trying to think of the guy's name that was the kind of the impetus for the Bureau to. One thing about the FBI, we like to steal stuff from people that were doing good, you know. So
sure.
I know Park Stearns was one guy, and he was in Texas, I think, and then University of Virginia, and I can't remember that guy's name, but they developed a program using a lot of his parameters, and Roy Hazelwood, John Douglas, Ken Reasoner, just several guys that got together and did that. And what the profiling was, it's not like some people think. It's based on many, many studies of crime scenes and offenders. When they would get an offender and say he's convicted, they would do intensive interviews of that person, male or female, mostly male, but some female. And they developed a protocol from those interviews, okay? Mm-hmm. Let's look at the crime scene that the police department did. And these investigations are only as good as the crime scene. So if they mess that up on the front end, it's pretty hard. Yeah. You've probably seen a lot of cases like that around.
Well, you read about mistrials due to crime scene forensics getting messed up.
Things that they've messed up, and the laboratory didn't do it right, things like that. But like I say, we take an offender that has been convicted and we go back and look at the crime scene and say, okay, here's what he did at that crime scene, and this is the offender. So we kind of know what he's like by the interview. Then we look at the crime scene. They did this over and over thousands of times and developed a protocol. Mm-hmm. For instance, when you go to a crime scene, say it's a rape. Mm-hmm. The guy breaks in a house and rapes a woman. Mm-hmm. Okay. Is he an organized offender or is he a disorganized offender? The organized offender will bring a rape kit with them, like a little bag with...
You get those at Walmart, right?
Yeah, just ropes,
Yikes.
Plastic ties, ropes,
duct tape, all that stuff.
Gloves, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And he'll bring that with him, knowing ahead of time that he's going to do this. Now, the disorganized offender would break in and then look around the house. What can I find? Like I'll cut a cord off a lamp and tie her up with that. Or if it's a murder, then he'll probably find the weapon there, like a butcher knife in the kitchen or something. The organized offender would bring
all his tools
with him. So that's basically an overview of what we look for. Then if you say, okay, this guy's an organized offender, he brought everything with him. Okay, here's a list of things that an organized offender would probably be, And it's not always exact. I mean, it's just something that we give to the investigators here's what you might be looking for. What kind of vehicle he might drive. Is he a single child? Was he abused? All these kind of things.
See, now I find that fascinating. How can you look at a crime scene and say, oh, well, he's probably a single child, or he drives a Jeep Cherokee, or...
Well, you can't really say it definitively, but it gives you a place to go for. You're looking... If you have 15 suspects, you look at those 15 suspects. Anybody meet the profile of that crime scene? And that's what they're doing, basically. It's not rocket science or anything. It's just based on studies, years and years and years of studies.
Is an organized offender trickier to catch? It's a higher intelligence, I would imagine.
most all. They have more intelligence and maybe a little more cunning. Like we had this guy here, the wooded rapist. I don't know if you read about him, but
I don't think so.
I won't say his name, but he was convicted. Metro Police. Pat Pastiglione a great detective with homicide, and he and others worked on this guy. He would basically, it was here in Williamson County. He would hide in the woods and watch houses and watch young females when their routine. He'd get their routine down. Like if they went out in a hot tub or something at night, then he would come up in a costume and rape them. Mm-hmm. His first victim happened to be the sister of an FBI agent, and she really fought back on this and bit his hand and took that piece of flesh and stuck it under the mattress, and that was our first DNA that we had on, because we didn't know. Then as cases, I think he had 8 or 9 rapes in this area. As the cases progressed, then that DNA eventually matched to him. But that's the sort of thing that.
Gosh, she's a smart woman.
Yeah,
to have that kind of wherewithal in that.
She
moment.
fought him, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of the other ones didn't, and I hate to see when they teach these classes to the women about what to do if you're raped.
Yeah.
There's no rhyme or
answer. Reason.
No.
Yeah. I've heard 2 things. I've heard fight back or don't fight back, and based on like you could get killed if you fight back. But I would imagine your flight or fight responses.
If you can get away, get away. But
yeah.
you know, like if you're outside or something, a lot of these joggers now getting accosted on these jogging trails, and if you can outrun them, do it. But I would never tell a person always fight or always submit. I mean, it's just it's a toss up. So
you've, I'm sure, been on a lot of cases in your career.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything, I know that you probably don't want to, I assume the reason why you didn't say that rapist's name is you don't want to glorify him at all or give him any kind of
and
any kind of notoriety.
There's relatives out there, you know, wives and people, you know, you just don't want to.
No, that makes sense. Is there any particular crime scene that you worked that as you were looking at it, you're like, oh, I can tell, because you've studied all the things, you could tell who it was you were looking for? A particular case that might have...
Yeah, one that the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation was working was, and I don't want to say his name again, but he was very notorious here in the area. He killed a lot of fast food workers. Mm. He would go into McDonald's and Captain D's and Baskin Robbins. And they called me up to Clarksville. You know where Dunbar Cave is up in Clarksville?
Uh-uh. I know where Clarksville is.
David Allen Coe lives there.
Yeah, sure.
But it called me up and said, we got a double homicide. It was 2 young girls that worked at Baskin Robbins. And it looked like, to the investigators up there, it's 2 perpetrators that did this. But when I got there during the crime scene, and I could tell it was one guy. And one girl was floating face down on the edge of the lake. The other one was up the hill, stabbed in the back several times. And you can see the blood splatters. As she ran, he was chasing her up the hill. And I surmised if it had been 2 people, then he probably would have had them the same place. But she got away and chased her. Now, that's not exact, but it turned out to be pretty accurate when they finally arrested the guy.
Why did he prey on fast food workers?
Opportunity, crime of opportunity.
Okay, it
wasn't. And he's deceased now, and I can say his name's Paul Dennis Reed was his name. Mm-hmm. He died in prison.
I swear it's something about the 3 first names. Why is it people with 3 first names for their whole name?
And I've read all these books about how you look at an offender like that, and certain facial features will, nail them, but that's not really
What accurate. Do you mean by that?
Well, they say if your earlobes, you got the earlobe here, if they grow straight down into the side, that they're likely to be some kind of sexual offender, but that's not.
Interesting.
I don't think it's accurate. But this guy was, and when I looked at him, and I interviewed him, yeah, definitely. I never brought that up, but that's something that somebody wrote about, some psychiatrist at some time.
Do I have that?
Yeah, you got it. You're nailed.
Uh-oh.
No,
I better watch myself.
But actually, profiling was a very small part of what I did. I only did that for the last 12 years.
So when profiling began, from what I understand in reading some of the history of it, is that a lot of people, even within the FBI, maybe police force, were kind of poo-pooed it. They're like, oh, that's just psychology bunk.
Well, I got that when I went up to Clarksville. You're not right. The sheriff said, I already got these guys in jail, the ones that did it. They were just burglars that he had grabbed in the area. And I said, no, I don't think so. But we went back and forth. But the TBI pretty much listened and knew what they were doing.
What drew you to profiling then, if you'd only done it the last 12 years?
Well, I was a hostage negotiator way back. I did that first. And I got lot of classes at behavioral science, at Quantico. I'd go back for in-services.
Sure.
I kind of got interested in that, but...
you become more interesting every minute.
I was a hostage negotiator first and attached to a SWAT team. I was on the first SWAT team at Washington Field Office.
Yeah.
When Mr. Hoover died, we didn't have SWAT and we didn't do international cases and things like that, but after he passed away, they kind of branched out into stuff like that.
So I'm curious, if you were a hostage negotiator, I imagine there's a fair amount of profiling that takes place in that just inevitably.
As you're talking to the people, you try to size them up, of course.
Sure.
But the basic thing in negotiating is when you get in a situation like he's gone in a bank and he's robbed the bank, but the police get there before he gets out, now he's got captives in there. He's holding a gun on them. Mm-hmm. Okay, now it's my time to talk to him through a bullhorn or through the telephone or something to try to get him out, to surrender. The first 5 minutes of a situation like that is the most deadly because the anxiety level is way up here, way high. And it's the negotiator's task to bring that down to the point where, look, your only way out of there is through me. I'm the one you got to trust, Otherwise, this SWAT team surround the building, they're going to light you up, And that's what you start with.
Do people tend to then listen to you, or because I would imagine there's a fair amount of ego attached to someone who's willing to not only rob a bank but take a hostage. So, I mean, how do you even?
Well, a criminal in the act usually they didn't really mean to want to take a hostage
because that's complications.
And we have something called. You ever heard of the Stockholm syndrome?
Yes.
Okay, that developed in 1973. There was a bank robbery in Stockholm, Sweden. And the guy held. Let's see, how many did he have? 3 hostages, I believe. They were bank workers. 2 women and 1 man. And he held them for like 24 hours. And they talked to him. Finally, he decided to give up. He was hungry and all that kind of stuff. So he gave up, and they started interrogating him. Well, when he came out, police threw him up against the wall and, kind of roughed him up a little bit. And one of the women that had been the hostage came out, jumped on the back of one of the officers and said, "Leave him alone. He didn't mean to do this." They said, "Wait a minute. He's held a gun on you for 24 hours in there." And they started looking at other cases like that. And really the father of our hostage negotiation program was a NYPD captain named Frank Bolz, B-O-L-Z. And I think Frank's still living. He, this was back in early 70s when he started. And he was a negotiator for New York Police Department and just had a really good track record of getting people out. So they started looking. Again, the Bureau looks at that and says, we need to incorporate this. So they bring him in and put a program together, and it's really, really successful.
Man, it'd be so cool to go and take FBI classes. That would be incredible. I suppose they don't really let civilians do that, but...
Not much. I took a bunch of them, but probably too many.
Well, I mean, I'm just imagining all the things you learn. It's got to be so fascinating.
Yeah, I forgot half of it.
Well, you don't need it, so it's somewhere in your brain probably. Yeah. So if you, sticking with the hostage negotiation for a second, when you go in and you're trying to get these people to come back out, they know it's really a lose-lose situation. So at that point, you're just trying to make sure they're not going to... You're trying to limit the amount of casualty at that point.
You try to play on their survival instinct. Do they want to get out of this? Now you have some that want to do suicide by cop, and they're there for that purpose. And you got to try to figure that out. At that point, you want to get them to a point where maybe a sniper can take them out or something like that. If he's going to escalate the situation, but the one premise that we go on is time is on our side. The longer the time lapses, the more successful you're going to be. The first 5-10 minutes, you got to really get that anxiety level down.
Which is the opposite for something like, I guess, a murder situation where time is of the essence as far as catching somebody.
Yeah, that's an investigation. This is an actual on the moment deal. And the reason time is good because you got hunger comes in, thirst comes in. Wanting to get out.
Sure.
Go to the bathroom.
Their own instincts of getting out. Yeah. That makes
We had
sense.
one guy that gave up one time, but before he went in an office space, and there was 4 hostages, I believe. It was a domestic situation that started out, and the target was not there. The woman was not there, but he got caught in there and got these 4 hostages in the office. Just before he came in, he'd drunk a 6-pack of beer. Well, you know what you got to do when you...
A lot of peeing.
Yeah, exactly. And that was we were able to get him out on that basic instinct, you know. That.
Why didn't he just pee in a corner somewhere? I'm surprised.
Ask him that later. He said there's women there.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm. But you know that wouldn't happen on every case.
Sure.
Just that particular one. But
it's got to be like juggling chainsaws and kittens.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, if they ask for food,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we don't go to McDonald's and buy a sack of hamburgers and get that into them. We go to Kroger and get a loaf of bread, some mayonnaise, some mustard, some lunch meat. Put that in there to them. You know why that is?
Because it's a routine feeling and it makes you human to have to make a sandwich.
That's part of it. He's not going to put his gun down and make the sandwich. He's going to say, "You make my sandwich." Okay,
Yeah.
So now you're interacting with him.
Yeah.
What's the biggest social time in a family? It's dinner time.
Mealtime,
You sit
yeah.
down and eat. So here you've made a sandwich for him. That raises the Stockholm level in your favor just a little bit.
Wait, does the Stockholm Syndrome work the opposite way too?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just for the person being held, but for the
Right.
person. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
see, you don't
Yeah.
really think about that.
Yeah.
That it goes the other way too.
If he's robbed a 7-Eleven and got caught in the act, and he's got hostages in there, your food thing's probably is going to be out the window because he's got
A lot of Jolly Ranchers happening.
everything he can do, honey buns and whatever
Yeah.
he needs is right
Sure.
there.
Yeah.
But in other situations, you use food. Okay, you ask for a cigarette. You don't throw him a whole pack of cigarettes. You take a pack of cigarettes, you empty all of them but 2. Throw that into him. He smokes those cigarettes, he's going to want another one. Every time you give him something, you ask for something in return. Would you, okay, I know you want a cigarette, would you let Susie go? She's in there and she's pregnant. Or you try to find out who's in there and get a little victimology going with it.
Mm-hmm.
And appeal to his sense of, you don't want to hurt this elderly gentleman. I mean,
Do you find that that's the case? That with most people, most offenders, that they still do have a thread of humanity
Sure.
happening?
Except the sociopaths, but
Like the Ted Bundys would.
yeah. Now he might too. I mean, you just don't. There's no cut and dried answer.
Sure.
You just got to use your
Did
instincts.
Ted Bundy ever let anybody go?
I don't know. I don't remember.
I don't feel like he did.
I don't remember. Probably not, because they would be a witness.
Yeah. Oh, that is a good
That's
point.
several of like Edmund Kemper, the big guy over in Utah. He never let anybody go because they're witnesses. Paul Dennis Reed here in Nashville, he tried to kill everybody because he didn't want to witness. One Mexican guy that worked at McDonald's survived like 14 stab wounds, and he was our great witness on the stand. Pat Bastiglione did a great job with him, interviewing him. And but he was a survivor.
Yeah.
And Paul Dennis Reed had done this at a bowling alley in Dallas, Texas, about 10 years before. And he left a witness there, and it got him caught. He served like 8 years in the...
That's it?
Yeah, he didn't kill anybody.
Oh.
He didn't. That's why he said, I got to kill him now if I'm going to do it. So.
Oh, yes.
And he wasn't necessarily a sexual offender. He didn't, as far as I know, he didn't assault anybody. He was just murder. And he's psychotic.
So back to the profiling. You had mentioned when we met that you had interviewed Dahmer.
Yeah, that was many years ago. I can't remember what. That was in conjunction with the Behavioral Science Project,
So basically...
He's already caught.
Yeah, he's already caught, and you guys went in and interviewed a whole lot of people that had been caught if they were willing to...
Yeah, just building up our protocols for profiles,
What was that like to talk to him?
Well, I wasn't the main interview. I was just sitting on it.
Oh, okay.
He was jovial, congenial. Really didn't offer much. I mean, most of these guys try to be manipulative. Bundy was a manipulative guy.
He was highly intelligent, right?
Yeah, and he'd try to ask the off. Now, I wasn't involved in anything with him, but he tried to ask the officers about their families and, get them talking about themselves,
Turn it around.
He had to always redirect them. Now, we're not here to talk about me. Let's talk about you. So,
At that point, why do you think it is? They're caught, and in Ted Bundy's case, he's going to the chair. There's no doubt about it. Why maintain that all the way to the end? I would almost think that if I was a narcissist, I would want people to know how clever I am and why I did what I did.
Some of them do. It's not black and white.
Nothing's cutting.
No.
Who is the most interesting of the sociopaths you've met or interviewed yourself?
Oh, probably Reed, I guess, the one here. But mainly we would offer advice to the detectives, Metro detectives, when they were doing the interview, because they had to make the case. It's not an FBI case if it's a murder, unless it's on a federal reservation.
Or it crosses state lines,
then they ask for assistance and call a UFAP warrant, unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. Then we can go after them, but the jurisdiction still lies where the crime was. They bring them back.
What if there's crimes in many states? Say, I don't know, I assume there are serial killers out there that cross several
Well, they're
states.
very mobile, yeah.
Yeah.
We had one here, Menendez, I think he was a truck driver, and he killed prostitutes. And Pastiglione got him too. But yeah, they're very mobile. But the only way we get involved with that is if the district attorney, like in Chicago, says, okay, we think he's left the state. They'll go to the U.S. Attorney's Office, apply for an unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, which makes it a federal crime. Now, we only look for them. Now, we may interview them and catch them, but normally we bring them back to the jurisdiction and let the police do their thing.
Do the modern day shows, like the Criminal Minds, the Mentalist, all these shows, and some of them, of course, the characters are psychic and they go in and they just feel what's going on.
Yeah.
But in these the prevalence of these shows are incredibly popular. Has that actually made it more difficult because it makes the criminal element one step smarter? They know that there's all this forensic stuff. There's no, or is it still pretty much the
They always get careless at some point.
Yeah.
There's some that don't.
Hubris takes over?
Yeah. Mickey Miller was a great detective with Metro, and he had a good quote one time. They asked him, a reporter asked him, Captain Miller, if a psychic led you to find the body of a person, what would you say to that psychic? He said, I'd probably say turn around and put your hands behind your back.
Interesting.
Let me handcuff you. Because he said, of course, I'll get a lot of flashback on that, that.
Yeah. I
people
personally believe in intuitive ability.
Well, it's intuitive ability, but, the Criminal Minds show, one thing, we never got our own private airplane to fly around.
Yeah, they're pretty fancy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the BAU unit for that.
No, didn't work that way.
Yeah.
We're lucky to get a coach seat,
Yeah. By the way, thank you for your service. I should have said that at the top of the conversation.
That was a fun career. It was good.
So how about some highlights? What is something that you can...
Worked on a FCI undercover case. FCI is foreign counterintelligence. It was common knowledge that the KGB was picking up information from somebody in the military. And through informant information, I don't even know how it originated. I was just one of the players eventually. I'd come back I'd been to language school in 78. I was on the fugitive squad in Washington. One day they called me and said, would you be interested in going out to Monterey for a year at the Defense Language Institute and taking the language? And I said, well, hadn't thought about it. And I called Gloria. Said, you want to move to California for a year? She said, let's book it.
This is your wife?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been married 48 years, so she's been in all of this.
Yeah.
But
I bet she'd be an interesting conversation.
She wouldn't tell you a thing. So I went out and took Vietnamese for 48 months at Defense Language Institute. Came back to Washington and got on the Chinese Communist Squad and it was a foreign counterintelligence type stuff. I'd been criminal all up until then.
And you served in the infantry as well.
Yeah, very briefly. I ROTC graduate out of Tennessee Tech.
Yeah.
Went to Army, jump school, but anyway, came back to. I was on the fugitive squad. Went to language school. Came back to Washington to work foreign counterintelligence. Mm-hmm. Well, the active squad on FCI was the Russian KGB at that time. They'd been abolished since the Soviet Union fell. Mm. Putin was one of those guys, you know. I got a call one day from Don Marshall, who was my supervisor. He said, we got a special case going, and every squad needs to give up 3 guys. Well, I was fairly new. He said, you're it. I said, oh, I hate these specials. They usually turn out to be boring, but this thing consisted of all summer long laying on the beach in Ocean City, Maryland, watching the KGB guys and seeing who they met with. They were in here from the embassy, you know, but they were spies. I mean, there's no doubt, and we followed them all the time.
Didn't they know they were being followed, or did they think they were?
I've been in a restaurant in Washington before where there's 2 of them over there, there's 3 of us over here, and they bought our lunch. We get to pay, and they said,
that's like the movies.
Well,
yeah.
But it's a cat and mouse game. Anyway, we did observe. I didn't observe it, but one of our team guys did, passing an envelope to a Navy guy. Mm. So they got on to him, and long story short, they determined that they were manning dead. You know what a dead drop is? Mm-mm. That's where, this is all before cyber stuff, you know. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have internet. Mm-hmm. This was in 1978, just when I come back from language school. There wasn't any of that. In fact, we had pagers. We had to, you know, I had a crazy supervisor. Every time I was out working something, he'd page me, want me to find a phone and call him. When you're in D.C., pay phones are always cut off. Somebody's vandalized them. You can't. So it was frustrating. But anyway, they established this case called Poltergeist. That was the, you can probably Google it, and I think there's probably some stuff on it, but I think that movie had just come out, so they named this Poltergeist. Well, the dead drop is where the spy comes over, the person, the military person or the government person is going to pass some secrets to him. So they find a location, like under a bridge. Mm-hmm. They put the documents under there. They leave. The KGB guy comes and gets this information, puts a bundle of cash where that was. The mole, the person in the U.S. comes back and gets the money. Okay, the most notorious one of these was Robert Hansen. He was an FBI agent. He was passing secrets to the Soviets, and they got on to him. But this, going back, I keep digressing back to the Poltergeist case. We created a false engineering company named Vitus Engineering, and we had 5 different spots. We knew it was somewhere in the woods around Dahlgren, Virginia, which was just below Langley, where CIA is. Very wooded area. So we had these 5 dead zones, and we put trailers there, and we were making like we were working on telephone lines, things like that. And this, I was the supervisor of one of the sites, and this went on for 6 months.
So you're pretending to put together a company. Yeah.
Well, we did. They had a backstop and everything.
Yeah.
Well, I never knew, what had happened when the thing went down. Typical Bureau fashion, they call us in and say, okay, the case is over. Y'all go back to your regular stuff. Well, what happened? Well, we can't tell you.
Oh. Does that happen a lot?
Oh, yeah. It's called a need to know, that
sure.
You just don't want to spread around. Well, found out later it was pretty decent case, and they arrested several people that were Navy people that were doing that.
That were selling secrets.
Right. Yeah.
So that's probably very common, though, I'm sure.
I think they just caught one recently. Let's see, what was he? He was a Chinese guy. He was in the military, but he was trying to do that.
Yeah. It's amazing the power of money.
Oh, yeah.
What it will do. Well,
Hansen was an agent. In fact, he worked at Quantico for a while, and he was passing big secrets to and they estimate that some of the stuff that he gave the Soviets resulted in the death of several of our CIA operatives, revealing sources and things like that.
Treason, obviously. That man, I assume, was put to death, Hansen.
Life in prison he's at Colorado Maximum, Colorado.
Okay.
He was offered a plea deal to take death off the case to see. We tried to find out what damage he did. So he did come up with all the things that he had done. And so he got life without parole.
Sure. It's fascinating. Why do you think he did it? Just money?
He was a complicated guy. He was a very religious guy on the front. He was a Catholic, and he'd go to mass every day and that kind of stuff. But then on the other end, he was going to strip clubs and had hookers and drank a lot and things like that. Beat his wife, and I mean, it's just a total dichotomy for what he wanted people to think he was.
Yeah.
So
I don't know that that's so uncommon. Yeah. So you had mentioned as well that but this when we spoke, was that yesterday? I don't know. I lose track of time. But you had had a conversation with James Earl Ray.
Yeah, he was over at the prison.
So James Earl Ray, for those of you listening that don't know, he is the man who assassinated Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. King.
Yeah. He had escaped from Brushy Mountain and went to Europe, got to Europe somehow, and Kenny Bounds and George Zeiss, two agents from Quantico, were tasked to go over there and bring him back. And they put him in they call the Walls here, the Tennessee State Prison. It's the old prison where they filmed The Green Mile. Remember that movie?
I do.
It's right out there on Cockrell Bend.
Okay.
It's still there.
Yeah.
They take tours of it now. That's where old Sparky was. And anyway, he was in there, and I was in there to interview somebody else, and they had me wait in the library, and he was manning the library. I was working in the library. I just had a casual conversation with him. He told me about his book. But I didn't really interview him or anything. We just exchanged pleasantries and about it.
Yeah, I think that's twice now you've said that the people you talked with were genial, were pleasant and conversational, and I think that's such a important thing to note for me, at least, is that the people who are like this, who do these things, can be very. We like to paint them as these monsters that are ogres and have warts all over them and, are out, slashing and gashing, but they can also just go to the grocery store and say hello to you over the melons, know.
Now we had one guy that, kind of interesting case, his name was Roy Edward Flowers, and I believe he's deceased now too. He was a bank robber. He robbed probably 75 banks all over the country.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and he robbed one here. My partner and I were right down the street eating lunch, and he robbed one. Time we got there, he was gone. But we had good surveillance camera of him, and he always wore this hat. He'd come in the bank and he put that hat on, and the hat said, let's see, what is the exact quote? No, if guns are outlawed, only outlaws will have guns. That was on his hat, baseball cap.
No way.
Yeah.
So he had a sense of humor.
I got a great picture of him somewhere. I think it's in that scrapbook right there. Anyway, he was at, where the Merchants is downtown? Okay. That was an old flop house. I mean, it was a drugstore in the 1800s, turned into a hotel, and it had a bar there. It was seedy, real seedy. Lower Broadway was terrible. When I got here in 1980, it was hookers and drugs and dirty bookstores and all of them down Lower Broad. Well, Roy Flowers was in there at the bar, and he had a gun in his belt, and the bartender saw it and got nervous, didn't know who he was, of course, so he calls Metro. Well, Leon Taylor was walking the beat, Metro officer at that time. Leon and I became good friends. He's walking the beat, so he gets the call. He goes in there, he and his partner, and Flowers is sitting at the bar because he didn't know who he was. And he says, "Sir, I need to talk to you. Would you step outside?" And Flowers turns around with the gun, and boom! Leon put his hand up. It shot his ring finger off. So we always called him Stubby from then on. But shot his ring. His wedding ring went flying. Finger was off. Well, the partner pulls out and shoots Roy Flowers right here, twice, right there.
Right in the chest.
He goes down. All all the other officers arrive, and they arrest Flowers. They take him to the hospital, patch him up, take him to the workhouse, which is over in East Nashville. That's where they put the real violent guys. And so I had like 5 bank robberies I needed to close, and he was a suspect in like 3 of them. So I went over to interview him, and they opened the cell. I went in the cell, closed the cell door. He stands up and pulls his shirt up, and he says, "See where you bastard shot me?" And he said, "That won't get me. You guys can't do anything to me." Okay.
Wow.
Pretty
nice
tough guy.
Yeah. Nice guy.
So I gave him a business card, and we talked. And I think I went back and talked to him several times, and we did close, I think, 1 robbery that he had admitted. Well, he gets transported to Petersburg, Virginia, where there was a robbery that they were going to interview him. He escapes. And he's out in the woods, and the dogs are chasing, just like in the movies. You know, the hound dogs are chasing.
How did he get out? It's so crazy.
I don't know how he got out.
God.
He's chasing. Well, they finally find him. You know, they surround him, and he gives up, and they handcuff him. They search him. They find my business card in his pocket. So they said, "Okay, what's up with this?" So they called, all upset. Like I said, "Well, I'm doing a bank robbery investigation." So it was okay, but.
Oh man, they're like, "What are you robbing banks too now?"
Oh yeah, I was his partner. Yeah.
So let's back to profiling. We're bounced around, I know, but when I've often heard, as a woman, of course, growing up, you hear about all the things about rape, and you're like, okay, always be vigilant, always be aware, all that stuff. And now, of course, there's things like roofies and all this sort of
date rape
drugs, correct. I've actually had personal friends who have been drugged at a bar and kept for a weekend and had to escape, things like that. I know it's a real thing. My question is, I've always heard that rapists, for example, are operating not from sex, but from a place of anger and violence. But I mean, that's sort of that's a simplistic way to put it, right? Is there any kind of way for a person to know, like any kind of something that someone might give off where your spidey sense might?
Not really. Roy Hazelwood was our expert at behavioral science on rape, and I took several classes that he taught. He said rape is not a sexual crime; it's a crime of violence. It's not. They're not really there for sexual gratification, except they do occasionally, which gives us good DNA evidence if they do.
Sure.
But it's more of a control, temper control, something in their mind that women, they want to get back at women for something, and it's all kind of, tabs you can put on them for that, but
there's not really a marker. You meet somebody and you just say, oh, other than your intuition, which I do think speaks quite loudly in some cases.
Well, the victimology plays a big role.
How do you mean?
Okay, if you're a girl and you go to a bar, get at the bar and get drunk, you're gonna have a problem. I mean, maybe. It's just
because you've put yourself in a
vulnerable.
weekend. Yeah, sure. That's not to say the drunk girls. I understand what you're saying. It's not the victim's fault, but it puts the victim in a place where
the threat level is raised.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's not
vigilance is a good survival mechanism.
And running by yourself in a secluded area,
with your headphones on and you can't hear anything.
Your victimology goes up.
Yeah.
It's that level.
Sure.
So vigilance is the big thing, but still, you can still get in trouble.
Sure.
There's been several cases here of notoriety lately, but a couple of them I can't talk about. But,
yeah.
I don't think there's any one way you can look at a guy and say, oh, he's a rapist.
Yeah. You
can look at the toughest, meanest looking guy, he could be
they're usually pussycats.
Nicest fellow in the world.
Yeah, I've noticed that about big, huge bouncers, that they tend to be very sweet.
And it's
people.
not the big guys. I never had trouble in 30 years arresting a big guy. I can't put that in a box, so that's the way it always is. But I got my butt whipped a couple of times by little wiry guys. They just
something to prove.
Didn't want to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I read recently that there are upwards of 50 active serial killers in the United States at any given time. Do you agree with that?
I don't know.
Oh.
I have no idea.
There's no way to know.
Could be 100. Could be,
So it's not really, I mean, there's, 350 million people in America? Maybe more. I don't know. I lose track.
Close, yeah.
Yeah. And so in one way, that sounds like a whole lot of people going out there murdering people. But on the other hand, I guess in comparison, it's still a tiny fraction. But
and you try to lump all the murders into like serial killers. They're not all serial killers. Some of them are spree killers. A spree killing is like when you go you get in your car and you drive several states and you're killing people along the way. You're not really classified as a serial killer. It's a spree. You're on a crime spree. You may kill 5 people at once. Serial killer usually spreads it out a little bit. A spree killer is usually in a short time frame. So it's kind of an oversimplification. But.
So, like the DC shooters, would they be considered spree killers or serial killers?
They were serial killers. They targeted people. They were shooting out of the back of a trunk of a car, if I recall.
Yeah. The sniper. Yeah.
One of them got the death penalty. The younger one got life, I think, something like that. But yeah, that's probably a serial killer, I would think. But did you see that movie? Woody Harrelson was in it.
Natural Born Killers.
Yeah, that was spree killers.
That was an intense movie.
Yeah, it was just.
So it's just like somebody goes, "Hey, let's for the hell of it, let's go do this."
Right.
Yeah, but something's got to be a little off to start with. I know that there's
sure they are.
The serial killers. There's that triangle, right? Bedwetter. Was it arson, bedwetter, and
triad is called enuresis, the bedwetting, cruelty to animals, and arson. If a child exhibits those 3 things, like through the age of 10, you might want to look at them a little bit. It's not all the time. It's not exact. But if you have those 3, the psychiatrists are looking at them. Again, they've studied thousands of cases, and go back to a Dahmer guy. He probably had those. I'm not really sure if he did, but
I think I remember reading that he had that stuff, and I think he had the head wound thing too, getting hit in the head at a young age.
I haven't heard that as the triad, but
it may not be a part of the triad, but I think many of the serial killers, at least that I have read about, they had a head trauma as a kid. I listened to a great podcast because I'm fascinated by this stuff. It's called My Favorite Murder, and they go through and they talk about murders that have happened through all the way back. I mean, as far back as they're cataloged. So
some show coming out on History Channel about Jack the Ripper. They claim he moved it
from here.
Yeah, moved to Chicago and he's buried somewhere.
They think he's the H.H. There's speculation. Somebody has speculated H.H. Holmes and Jack the Ripper are the same person.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean. Yeah. Jack the Ripper is a fascinating case. So just talking about profiling, right? They thought maybe he was a surgeon or somebody that had knowledge of anatomy. And I mean, you could tell that by the cuts, I guess.
Yeah. We had a fascinating case we studied. Of course, it was way before I was born, but a guy named Edward Gein.
Oh, God, yes. Yeah.
He was up in Michigan, I believe.
There's a creepy dude.
Yeah, he was a cannibal. He'd eat them. He'd cut them up, eat them.
I mean, what? Where do you think? Gosh, that turkey sandwich doesn't look that good. I think I'll go eat someone's face. That's... What?
They found lampshades made out of skin, and his cereal bowls were human skulls. I mean, it was something,
Well, how does somebody like that get made?
He got caught eventually.
No, I don't mean get made. I mean, literally, how is he created?
Something went loose somewhere. I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist, so I don't, I can't answer that. He started first robbing graves. The funeral, the flowers used to be on a fresh grave. He'd dig them up and eat them.
Oh.
Then it's a progressive type of sickness, and he started kidnapping people, hanging them up in the barn and butchering them. That kind of thing,
Ed Gein is who, didn't they kind of use him for the Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs?
I think so.
Yeah.
There was a lot of things that went into that.
Yeah. The Nazis had a fun time with skin as well, from what I remember reading.
I was at Quantico when Jodie Foster came down doing research on that Silence of the Lambs. I didn't ever see her, but...
Did you see the movie?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I saw it, yeah.
Do you think it was
Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
It's all fiction, but...
Yeah.
It's based on reading, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you know why clowns won't eat cannibals?
Why?
It tastes funny. That's a very small part of my career was criminal work, mostly bank robberies, kidnappings, extortions, interstate crimes, things like that. That was
the kidnapping generally happened from a parent being disgruntled.
About 88% of the kidnapping cases are
parental rights. Yeah.
Stranger abductions are rare, but they happen, and Elizabeth Smart.
Sure.
Many examples of it.
That one there was a guy working on the house, and he was like the house painter or something.
Yeah, he was a weirdo.
Yeah.
And he and his wife, and they kind of made like she was their daughter.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Mormon family.
I mean, I think about this kind of stuff when I'm in bed at night. I think the likelihood of somebody breaking in and murdering me is rather slim, and I have precautionary measures, obviously, cameras and alarms and all that kind of thing. But it certainly goes through, especially if you're interested in these things, that it goes through. I think it heightens your awareness, but in a good way too. I suppose it makes you hyper vigilant when you're getting into your car. I don't just sit in my car and text or something. I get in my car, I turn on my car, I drive away. I don't stay there at night especially.
Oh, you text while you're driving?
No, I'm just saying, I don't, because you see a lot of people, especially at night, if you're leaving the bar or something, and I see a lot of people get in their car, they shut the door, and then they start doing their texting and stuff, and I keep thinking no, don't sit there.
You're being watched.
Yeah, you're sitting duck. If I'm watching you, who's to say someone else isn't watching you? Yeah.
That's right. I worked a lot of cartel cases.
Oh.
Dope.
That's fascinating.
We had wiretaps that we would do,
So that is legal? I'm so confused about that.
If you go to a court.
Oh, you have to get a
very lengthy affidavit. One affidavit I wrote for a wiretap, Title III they call it, was 180 pages of the affidavit. Probable cause that
where you're asking for the...
And the judge reads it. First it goes to the Department of Justice, they review it. All the attorneys look at it, and then it comes back down. You take it to a federal judge, he reads it. You come back the next day and you swear under oath that it's accurate. Then you can get the technical guys to get the tap going, Sometimes they have to climb a pole and direct a microwave dish or something.
Just like in the movies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we'd sit and listen, and you have to minimize. Like if I'm wiretapping you and you're talking to your attorney, got to cut it off.
Oh, wow.
Attorney-client privilege.
Yeah.
If you're talking to about a medical thing, it's called minimization. And I'd have to school all the people working on the thing. We'd do it 24 hours a day. Metro and TBI helped me with a lot of them. And we came up, Southwest Express was my case. I got the OCDF Case of the Year on that one, Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force.
Oh, congratulations.
It was out of Nashville. But it was a cartel out of Guadalajara. And they were funneling massive amounts of cocaine.
Into Nashville?
Chicago, Indianapolis, Nashville, and Atlanta. And we just happened to get on them here.
We are a music industry here.
It's a crossroads, too.
Yeah.
You ever go out I-40 and see the interdiction guy sitting on the side of the road with the SUVs?
I guess not. No.
You ever drive to Memphis?
Once.
Well, if you look next time you go, they'll be probably between Waverly and Jackson. Usually in an SUV, they'll be sitting there. They're the interdiction units, and they get tips from various things, and they'll pull somebody over,
Oh, interesting.
And so we had that case, and we listened to these two guys. They were the middleman here, and we finally got enough evidence to go after them and took down quite a large amount of Mexicans. One in San Diego, a guy named Omar Rocha Soto. And he was the mastermind of it, but took him down. It was an interesting case. It was a lot of work.
Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah. I've done 2 or 3 other wiretap cases, but it's not like you think you can just go, okay, let's go tap a phone.
Does the NSA have to adhere to the no listening?
It's called the FISA rule, the FISA court.
Okay.
Yeah, they have to do that. Now
I always wonder about that when I'm talking to my dad on the phone and you hear this strange click. I think, is that the NSA listening? I don't know.
Well, see, the media tries to make everybody think that they listen to everything and say, well, just think how many phone calls there are a day in this country.
Many, many.
Billions.
Mm-hmm.
They can't listen. I mean, what they're doing is they're targeting
words, right?
Sometimes words, but it's numbers mostly. Like if you're talking to somebody that has had a connection with somebody overseas, that's a target.
Yeah.
Then that goes
Red
into a
flag
different category. Now then you go back later and try to connect the dots with that, But it's not somebody that's sitting there listening to everybody. No.
Yeah, I always joke that I must be on a few watch lists because of this podcast, and I have to research some nefarious characters, and then on the other side, I'm reading about how certain things are done, and I'm sure, and I order odd books on the internet. But yeah, it's so fascinating. I really appreciate your time.
No problem.
Thank you.
Okay.
If somebody wants to find you for investigative work, might they do so?
Yeah, it's Hodges and Associates.
I'll put links to your website on my website so that people can find, and some of the cases that you spoke of and the people you spoke of, I'll put links to so that people can read more if they're interested, which I'm sure they will be. It's all fascinating. Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thank you.